Hello, the internet. Welcome to the start of round 2. And that means the games get bigger and closer because most of the average games are already gone. Some huge die rolls about to take place. Could we get some major upsets? Let's find out. This is the North Division. And in this tournament, we play each of the pairs of games. So my kid and I played Power Grid, who was our winner from last year. And we also played Circadians First Light, which is a game that has been creeping up on us the more we play it. We rated each one on a scale from 1 to 10, 1 being, why do we still have this game? It sucks. And 10 being, this is one of the most amazing games. I can't wait to play it again. A lot of our games average around 7.5, but that's out of our 128 games. Most of the games that are in the round of 32 are usually around 8 out of 10 or 9 out of 10. In addition to that, we roll a die. We take half the value of the die and add that to the score. The first tiebreaker is whichever game had the higher score before the die roll wins on a tie. So if Circadians First Light is behind, for it to win the game, it has to hit a 3-pointer from half court, basically, and have a higher score at the end to beat Power Grid, because if it's tied, then Power Grid moves on. This is the second round, so we don't have to worry about the play-ins anymore. We don't have to worry much about the relegations anymore. We just see the scores, roll the die, mention the games, and call it a day. So, our 1 seed and the top game of the tournament and winner of last year is Power Grid. It is our Titan. It is I guess it's technically a Eurostar game. Very fun game. One of the few games we can get our youngest one to play, although this one we played 2-player. And this one came down to Daddy, aka me, doing some really good strategy the second to last round of the game to be able to pull the win. It was really close. This was one of the end of the game could have gone either way. This is a game we normally rate very high, but we gave it our highest rating ever. And the highest rating ever in any of our tournaments, our very first perfect score, 20 out of 20. But will it be enough to win the game? Let's find out. Going up against it, Circadians First Light. A little bit of backstory for this. The first time we played it 2 years ago. This game is rules-ways pretty light. I mean, there aren't a whole lot of rules, but it is a game where there's a lot of things going on. There's a lot of choices to make every round. And so it is a little bit heavy of a game, heavier than you realize when you're playing it, especially if you're an adult. To a 10-year-old, it's overwhelming. To a non-gamer, it's overwhelming. And this game is kind of hard to play. So the first time we played it, my kid rated it really low. I think he gave it a 4. And I gave it an 8.5 because I really liked it. And so it got a 12.5 the first time we played it. Last year, it was in the play-ins because it scored a 12.5, so that's where it fell. But then it came out of the play-ins just barely. No, actually, it scored a 16 in the play-ins. And it was the best game to not make it to the tournament. It was the bubble team last year. Well, this year, it is playing with a chip on its shoulder. And the more we play it, the more my kid likes it, the more I like it. This is a really fun work placement game, except for the workers or dice. There's a lot of different places to place them, a lot of different things to do, a lot of different ways to score points. And even though I absolutely obliterate my kid most games on this, he has a lot of fun playing it. And so it scored a 19, which is really high for us. And if it does not win today, if Power Grid moves on, it will be a 1 or 2 seed next year because the seeding next year comes from the final score that the game gets, not where it leaves the tournament. So keep that in mind. Now, it scored a 19 versus a 20, so it's behind by 2. That means it needs to roll 3 higher on the die in order to win, which means it has a 1 in 6 shot of winning this match and knocking out last year's champion and the highest rated 1 seed in the tournament. Could this be an 8 knocking off a 1, as it does sometimes happen in that particular sports tournament? Are we going to see history here? Is this going to be the first time a 1 goes out in the round of 32? And by the way, if Power Grid goes out here, it will definitely be the number 1 seed next year, because I don't see anyone else getting a 20. This may be the only shot to knock off Power Grid, really. So it comes down to here. Power Grid's the green die. First Light is the gray die. Who moves on to the next round? Who gets put back on the shelf until next year, where it can get its revenge? The answer is, I'm almost rooting for First Light, really. I love Power Grid. Power Grid's my second favorite game of all time. Oh, so close. Tie score. Tied at 21.5, but the tiebreaker goes to Power Grid because it started with a higher score. So just barely. Oops, I wrote that backwards. Just barely. Power Grid moves on. First Light is out. That is going to be definitely the highest rated team that will lose today, because no other team out of all of these scored a 19 or higher. So that was a heck of a matchup. A heck of a matchup. Wow, now we move on to Titan versus Sapiens. Now, Titan was a Final Four team 2 years ago and is my favorite game of all time and my number 2. Can it move on and we could get my favorite matchup of all time, my number 1 versus my number 2? Or will Sapiens steal the day? Now, Sapiens is a tile placement game that I bought by accident. Now, how do you buy a board game by accident? Well, let me tell you a story. My local game store used to have 2 auctions per year, board game auctions per year. And they'd post the board games for sale Friday night at like midnight, and the auction would start at like noon the next day. So spend the next 3-4 hours going over 400 games to try to figure out what games I wanted to bid on, how much I wanted to bid on each. One of the games was Mega Man, Mega Man board game, and kind of collectible, not necessarily a great game. And so I wrote a number for it, but I wrote it in the wrong line. I wrote it under Sapiens line instead. So the next day, they bring Mega Man up for bid, and I look at it, and I'm like, oh, I don't have a number for this here. I know I researched it. Maybe I decided it wasn't worth buying. Okay. So it sold for, I don't know, $12. And then Sapiens comes up with a starting bid of like $8 or $9. And I have like 12 written for it. And so I bid $8 or $9, whatever the starting bid was. And nobody else bids because, well, no one's heard of this game. And it sold to me. And then I realized, oh no, that was supposed to be my bid for Mega Man. So I bought Sapiens by accident. But a very happy accident, because this is the 5 seed, which means it's one of our top 20 games in our library. All right. So, very fun game. Titan is an old Avalon Hill game. I'd call it kind of an area control engine builder game, because you have an army and you're building your army, using your army to recruit new. Whoever's in your army decides who you can recruit. It's a very fun game. It's a game that could take a long time to play. I finally got my little one to play it, but both my little one and my older boy ran their Titan armies into mine. My oldest boy on purpose, and then won all the battles. So it was a very short game. Just because my kid likes to lose this one on purpose, that he enjoys it. So that's all that matters. Titan scored at 18.5. Sapiens scored a 17.5. So just like the previous matchup, it's off by 1. Sapiens has to outroll by 3. It has a 1 in 6 chance of moving on. Will we see our key matchup, or will Sapiens steal the day? And the dice say, by the way, Sapiens is the black die, Titan's the white die. Titan moves on. A little bit closer margin than the last one. Oh, I wrote that backwards again. All right. So Titan will face Power Grid. One of our previous year's Final Four, each of our 2 years' Final Fours will go at it. One will survive and move on to the Sweet 16. One will get put back on the shelf. Sapiens and First Light, thank you for playing. We enjoyed you. We'll play again next year. And with their scores of 19 and 17.5, this will be a 1 or 2 seed. This one will probably be a 5 or 6 seed next year. So it'll be about the same seeding next year. All right, moving on to the other half of the bracket. We've got the number 3 seed, Ticket to Ride, versus a game coming out of the play-ins, which took over the 6 seed. Now, note that if there is a seeding tiebreaker, games from the play-ins do not have a seed, so that tiebreaker is not used. So the seeding no longer matters when they come out of the play-ins. Last year we had 2 Final Four games from the play-ins. Power Grid was one, Jump Drive was the other. Can we see that again this year? Watch out for some of those play-in games like Twilight Imperium and Earth, maybe Burger Joint, and of course Twilight Imperium. Oh, and Zombie World. So there'll be some fierce competitors. Ticket to Ride India, it's Ticket to Ride. The thing I like about India, which is why it's one of my favorites for Ticket to Ride, is it has this loop mechanic that if you have 2 ways to get from point A to point B, you get bonus points for that. And so so you have a strategy. Do I make more routes or do I make more ways to do my current routes? My kid beat me on this one because my starting hand sucked. So that is the downside of almost all Ticket to Ride games. If you get a bad starting hand, it definitely puts you behind the 8 ball. So that's why it doesn't rank higher than it does. But we did score it in 18. Twilight Imperium is a area of control, space battle, role choosing game. I have to get my young one to play. In order for him to agree to play, since I kind of won big the first game, I let them choose which secret agenda I had. They chose the one where I have to conquer someone's homeworld, which seemed to be kind of the hardest one. The final round of the game, I took out both their homeworlds the same round. I had all but 5 of the planets because I had to play a military strategy game. Ended up winning, but if my kid had used one of his cards cleverly, it could have gone the other way. So, I mean, there are some downsides to this game. You know, the number 8 roll, which gets you 2 points out of 10 that you need to win the game, is so ridiculously overpowered that the whole game revolves around trying to get to that and playing that, 2 or 3 times. So a lot of other stuff becomes almost unimportant. But it's still a fun game. We enjoyed it. We scored it in 18. This is our second play as a family. This is the 3rd edition, of course, not the 4th edition. And it's a game we play for an hour, then break for 4 hours, and come back and play it for an hour, and then break for 4 hours and play it for another hour until we're done. So it takes usually 3-hour sessions to finish it, which is a whole weekend for us, really. So yeah, it takes a while to play, and that's kind of why the fact that it takes 3 players to play it and it takes a weekend to play it is probably why it doesn't get to a lot of tables in a lot of people's collections. So it just kind of sits on the shelf. It sat on ours for a very long time because of that, and because it's a heavy game, and with kids, it's hard to play, especially with an 8-year-old. So I'm still getting over my cold. You can kind of tell I'm sneezing a little bit. The black die again is for Twilight Imperium. The white die is for Ticket to Ride India. This is a straight roll off. Whoever rolls higher wins and moves on. Whoever rolls lower, that's the end of the game for you. If it's a tie, we will have to go to tiebreakers. All right. So who's moving on? Ticket to Ride or Twilight Imperium? And it's a tie. So here is the tiebreaker. First tiebreaker is whichever scored the higher, which they scored the same. The second one is we vote for which game we think is better. My kid voted for Ticket to Ride India. I voted for Twilight Imperium. It's still a tie. The next tiebreaker is seed. As I mentioned before, almost like it was foreshadowing. That's the worst foreshadowing ever. Okay, it goes to seed, but since this came from the plans, it doesn't officially have a seed. So this tiebreaker is skipped. We go to the next tiebreaker, which is a straight up die roll. Now, since Twilight Imperium uses 10-sided dice, I am going to use a 10-sided. Now, do I have a 10-sided die in here? I did not, obviously not plan. Okay, I'm going to use a 20-sided die, but I'm going to ignore the number in front. So I'm going to basically turn it into a 10-sided die. So if it rolls a 20, it's just a 10. If it rolls a 15, it's a 5. Actually, no. In Twilight Imperium, you need to roll high. Ticket to Ride, we don't roll dice. So 6 through 10 will be Twilight Imperium. 1 through 5 will be Ticket to Ride. So on 11, Ticket to Ride wins. On a 9, Twilight Imperium wins. Everyone got that? All right, who is moving on? The third game, moving on to the Sweet 16, will be Ticket to Ride India. All right. Sorry, Twilight Imperium. I'll play again next year, which in some ways is good because the game takes for freaking ever. But this will probably be like a 3 seed next year. So expect it to be up there. And it's going to cause chaos next year. So Ticket to Ride India, next one to go. So far it's been the 1 seed, the 4 seed, and the 3 seed. So no upsets here. Now notice that I didn't put dice on this one. There's a reason for that. Masterpiece came in from the plans, but it had that new game smell. It's a really old game. This game's from like 1970, but this is the 1996 edition. It's got artwork. You buy the artwork through either buying it from the bank or from auctions. You can buy them from other players sometimes. They force them to sell them. It has to be played at least 3 players. It doesn't really work very well 3 players. Because if one player plays kind of weird and goofy or one person runs out of money, it completely obliterates the game. So I would recommend playing this at least 4 player. Otherwise, it gets really weird and bizarre real quick. And this also kind of goes for sort of a lesson for board games. Sometimes you can really enjoy playing a board game that's not great. And usually your level of desire of playing the game, the fun you have playing the game, is not necessarily based on how good the game is, but the people you play it with. For example, Munchkin. I know I can hear the boos. I know I can't hear you over the internet, but you're booing so loud I can hear you from Indiana. All right, so if you play Munchkin with friends, it could possibly be an okay game. If you play it with random strangers, the one time I played Munchkin, I played it with 3 random strangers. Let's just say, long story short, I hate Munchkin. I refuse to ever play Munchkin again. That game is the overlord of death. All right? I did not enjoy the people I was playing it with. Okay. Some games you get that one person who takes 10 minutes per turn on a game that should be like, you should know your turn in 10 seconds. It just makes a good game terrible. So the first time we played Masterpiece, it's a new game. We had fun. It was a silly game. We rated it kind of high. Too high, probably. As we rated it at 15.5, and it got a lucky 6 to get into the second round from the plans. Playing it a second time, it starts to show its true colors. This game is so ridiculously based on luck. My poor little boy, he had a $22 million painting and landed on a space that forced him to sell it to the bank for $3.5 million. He was in tears. So from that, he doesn't get to rate it, but my oldest boy does, because he would have given it a 0 at that point. My oldest boy gave it a 6. I was like, yep, that's about right. It scored a 12.5. It will be relegated to the play-ins next year and might not even get played because we are going to have a lot of games of the play-ins next year because it's going to be so big that we simply do not play because it's going to be too big of a tournament otherwise. So Masterpiece gets relegated, which is really great news for EcoFlux. So that means that EcoFlux may actually end up being a 16 seed next year. We'll see. We'll see. It's going to depend on a few things. So Agricola, which scored its typical 18.5. This is a work replacement game. I always beat my kid because he always scores around 20 and I always score around 40. But we have a lot of fun playing it. And that's what matters. Not necessarily who wins sometimes, but I mean, I like to win, don't get me wrong, but you know, it's a fun game, win or lose. And so it scored 18.5. Since it's more than 2.5, that is a blowout. No die roll on a die 6 divided by 2 could ever make Masterpiece win. So the no die roll is going to be required. Agricola into the Sweet 16, where it will face off against Ticket to Run India, and will be a very close matchup. So these are going to be two really good matchups in the Sweet 16. Agricola, of course, was our final was a Final Four, and lost in the semifinals last year to Penny Arcade. Could it make it back, or will Power Grid just absolutely stomp this round? The only team in the Sweet 16 from the North Division that has not been in the Final Four ever is Ticket to Ride India. Can it make a run and make an upset Agricola and then upset Power Grid? We'll find out. It's possible. It's possible. So that is the North Division. There's all your matchups for the Sweet 16. And I'll see you, or, well, you'll see, no, you don't even see, you'll see more games in the next video. That makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. Maybe that's why no one watches this. I wonder if I should just make up a random language and do these videos in a random language, and it would mean the same thing to everybody because nobody watches it. So, hey, if nobody's going to watch my videos, I get to make fun of the fact that nobody watches my videos. So don't watch my videos, otherwise I won't be able to make fun of the fact that you're not watching my videos. And definitely do not like or subscribe, because then I won't be able to make fun of the fact that nobody's subscribed and nobody likes my videos. That would just ruin half of my jokes. Or as the majority of the viewers of the channel, the cats meow, meow, purr, purr, meow. I don't know what I just said, but hopefully it was something nice. Or really mean. I don't know with cats if you're supposed to say nice things or mean things. Cats are so complicated. All right, anyhow, that's all. Goodbye, everyone.